This is another episode of the Utopia Podcast. I am CDJ. Alongside me tonight is gschwendt. Tommy, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm good. We got a lot of news to talk about, so we'll get right to it and we'll skip the small talk. Today, the first screenshot of NCAA Football 10 was released. It's a work-in-progress photo of Stanford in California. What are your thoughts on this picture?
Picture itself, to me, the first thing that jumps out at me is that it's just a gorgeous picture. I mean, the attention to detail, number one, the helmet just looks like an authentic helmet to me. But then also the depth of field that they have. It's a photography term called bokeh, to where everything in the foreground is very, very detailed, but then everything in the background is blurry. That, to me, it just makes the picture, in my opinion. Of course, and like a lot of people are complaining about, the arm is either really super sweaty or he's got a glass arm. That stands out, but I can easily overlook that, especially because as early as this is, we've still got 5 months away before the game comes out. So,
yeah, I thought it was a very great picture. And the art director of NCAA Madden was online on Operation Sports and had a comment on this picture. And he said, "This is the real deal, no Photoshop." And to quote him, "I'm actually not stoked that this image was sent out since the materials in the scene are not tuned at all. No fear, the players will not look like plastic and the helmet reflections will be more realistic than ever." So I think that's very positive news and addresses some of the concerns that people had with this picture. And a lot of people are wondering, well, so what's the status of this game? I know there's always the big misconception that the game at this point is still in huge development, when in reality, as soon as 09 dropped, they were at work right away on NCAA Football 10. And producer Adam Thompson was on Operation Sports, and today he let out that the uniforms for the teams were just finished this week. They need to go through them all and find the errors to fix, but they hope to put out a list of everything that they go through and address and fix for uniforms. I know YZ105, he's in the QA for NCAA Football. He posted in a thread at Utopia, and he had some thoughts about that. He's been talking with the community, and I know you've kept up on that, Tommy.
Yeah, he's actually been giving some good feedback, basically letting us, several people, myself included, have posted different uniforms, and he's basically come back and said, yeah, we do have a reference for that, and he didn't confirm that one uniform would be in and one wouldn't or anything, but basically was confirming that they have reference for it, which, in my opinion, gives a good feeling that they're going to get at least all of the ones that were available this past season that weren't in the game yet. So,
yeah, he's been doing a great job, and he and Adam have both done an excellent job of communicating with the community, especially as it relates to the uniforms. I know they haven't said what's going to be in, but it's very comforting when people point out something about their favorite school's uniform, and he says, "Yeah, we've got that on the list." And there was kind of another little mini debate we had on the site, and it came courtesy of Adam Thompson, something he brought up at Operation Sports. This year, the Minnesota Golden Gophers will be playing at a new stadium, TFC Bank. And to be in the game for EA, they have to go to the stadium, take photos, measure distances for the railings, seats, etc. However, there's not enough time this year because the TFC Bank Stadium will not be done in time to be in NCAA Football 10. So that leaves the production crew with a decision. Do they A, keep them at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome another year, which is an authentic stadium in the game, or do they give them a generic open-air stadium? And I believe you and I are on the opposite ends of this spectrum, according to the poll results. So I'll let you go first and give your answer. What do you think they should do with the Gophers?
Well, I understand that. I can understand it from both point of view, but if I were a fan, let's say Arkansas State was having a new stadium this year but wouldn't be in the game, I would want to, I guess, stick with what I know is home, instead of going to a random generic stadium that presumably multiple teams will be using. Obviously, we don't know how many new stadiums will be in the game this year or anything like that, but I would want to at least have a unique stadium for my home field. That's just my personal opinion. And if it's the Metrodome, then so be it. But at least it's better than having the same stadium as, let's say, Troy or whoever else.
Yeah, I'm the same way in that I can agree that whatever decision they make, I can see why they did it, and I can't really argue against it. My personal preference would be to go to the generic open-air stadium for a couple reasons. The first one being that this new open-air stadium in Minnesota one of the huge, factors and appeal for this is that it's an open-air stadium in Minnesota. So the winter games, theoretically and most likely, are going to be very cold, snowy, and that's going to be something very unique coming out of that dome. And I think another aspect is that for the last couple of years, the Alamo Dome has been an open-air stadium in NCAA football. So I think would hate to encourage them to continue down that road of having, an open-air stadium for a dome, and in this case, vice versa. That I think people can use their imagination and realize, hey, this isn't quite right. I'll just pretend it's a stadium in progress. Because if I was a Gopher fan, I see your point where the Metrodome is home. They know it. So having that realistic stadium does add a level of comfort, so to speak. But I think at the same time, there's going to be Minnesota fans who get into a dynasty, and if they get 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 years in their dynasty, and they're still at the Metrodome, I think they're going to be like, this isn't much fun, because I know my team is now at TFC Bank Stadium, an open-air stadium. This just isn't realistic. It's really tough, and I don't know how they're going to decide it. I know last check the poll on Utopia, I believe, was about 24-10 in favor of the generic open-air stadium, which it would have the Minnesota field art. I'm not sure what other Minnesota aspects it would have. But it is definitely a tough call.
Yeah, I agree. Again, like you said, I can, whatever they decide, I can go with, especially because I don't have a real say in the fight myself. So, but as long as they were to, I guess, ensure that they would have it in next year, then I would, again, want to stay with the Metrodome. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure it'll be in next year, but I would hate to speak for them. But I would guess that it would be one of the first ones they would try to get to, being a brand new stadium. And right. Finally, we have an NCAA basketball producer on the site, Sean Campbell, a great guy. I met him at the community event last year. He was a guy who he and Connor Dugan stayed till late evening, sitting around talking with us about the game, getting feedback. And it's great he's on the side. He's been taking feedback, not only what people thought of 09, what they liked, didn't like, but also NCAA Basketball 10. And one of the couple of questions he has asked are, one, what makes a tough home court tough to play in? How do we represent that in a video game? And another question is, online dynasty, how do we handle that? In football, it's easy because you have the weeks divided out, where in basketball, it's a long season, and you can have multiple games in a week. That it provides some more challenges to the team, but I think they realize that a lot of fans want online dynasty and NCAA basketball, and in my opinion, if they add that in, it takes NCAA basketball from right now a good franchise and probably the most improved of the last year to a must-buy if they can get online dynasty. And I know you've been keeping up with the thread. What have you thought so far from the very early comments we've had?
I want to give him a lot of credit because I know we're a hard group to come in and join. I think Greg kind of learned that from the beginning that, we're number one, we're tough to please, but at the same time, they can settle in and still, share the community with us, basically. But he's come in and done well, and he's stayed up with the thread, and he's asking a lot of our opinions. Basically, he wants to know what we think would be the best way to handle the game, and he's doing a good job of that so far.
I know I've been lucky enough to go to a couple of community events for the football and basketball titles, and the one thing I noticed at the basketball event last year, that they did a very good job of, they sat us down and they had a slide and they pulled out quotes from the community of different items, and then they went on to tell us how they put those into the game. So a lot of people think, they don't listen, they don't care. No, these guys do listen, they do care. They put a lot of pride into the work. They're a pretty small production team, but they want this game to be awesome. They want it to be better than NBA Live. They want it to be the best college basketball game on the market. And a lot of people think, well, yeah, but do they really listen? No, they do listen, they do read, they do hear what we have to say. So with that, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Utopia Podcast. Tommy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And everyone join us again for another episode of the Utopia Podcast.